Hi there, this is Mrs. Heineman with our Science Chart. Today we're going to talk about living things in the environment. And our big question is, how do organisms interact with the living and non-living parts of their environment? One of the first things we need to think about is, what does an organism get from its environment? And another way of talking about its environment is its habitat. It's a place where it can live. That habitat's going to provide it with food, water, and shelter. If an organism has all those things, that organism is going to be able to live, it's going to be able to grow, and it's going to be able to reproduce. Getting what you need. Think about these different organisms. A seal's needs are much different than the naked mole rat that lives below the ground, which is much different than the American eagle, which is much different from a pitcher plant in the rainforest, which is much different than a fungus. But all their needs have to be met in order for them to live, grow, and reproduce. When we talk about an organism's habitat, there's two main parts that we talk about. Our first part is the abiotic, or the non-living parts. We're talking about how much water is there, how much sunlight is there, how much oxygen. Really important in aquatic ecosystems. Talk about the temperature. Is it cold like in the Arctic, or is it warm and humid like in the rainforest? We can talk about the soil. And then we have the second part, and that's going to be the biotic part, or the living or was once alive part. That's going to be our plants, our animals, our bacteria, our fungus. Anything that was currently living or was once living is considered biotic. Organisms interact with both the living and non-living parts of those ecosystems. So here's our next big idea. We have these ecosystems that have living and non-living parts. How are they organized? Smallest level. We start with one organism. That's one individual. Next, we can look at a population. So these would be all the members of one species living in a particular area. So if we have an ant, which is an organism, and he's joined by a whole bunch of ants, that would become a population that's living in that particular area. When we start looking at all these different populations that come in there, say we have the ants and we have the anteater, and then we have the tree that the ants are living in, and we have other vegetation and other animals that are living there, those are going to make up the community of that ecosystem. So those different populations living together. At the end of it, when we talk about the ecosystem, that is going to be all the living parts and all the non-living parts. So those are going to be those biotic and abiotic factors that we just talked about. One thing we want to, when we use the word organism, we're talking about any living thing. And most organisms are a particular species. So we have a group of dogs here, and they can mate with each other, and they can produce offspring. They can also mate and reproduce. They would be considered a species. We also have another type of organism that is known as a hybrid. And that is where you take two different species and they mate, and they produce something that's kind of half of each of the original organisms. So if you take a zebra and a donkey, you get something known as a z-donk. And you've probably heard of this one. If you take a lion and cross it or mate it with a tiger, you're going to get a liger. These guys are not their own species. They cannot produce offspring. They're sterile. They're considered hybrids. So words you need to know: abiotic, biotic, habitat, species, population, community, and ecosystem. Until next time.